The magic broom, or the witch's broom, is an icon which has pierced the veil into our modern culture. Now, we can't imagine celebrating Halloween without the striking image of the witch's broom, right? And we're familiar with them in the Harry Potter films. It's as if this archetype has become deeply rooted within the collective conscience. And I'm certain you're going to find it rather intriguing to learn the actual origin of this trope. This is the mystery of the history of the Magic Broom. Now then, my enchanted friend, my charmed viewer, please, if you would, click the thumbs up, okay? Just do it. No, just do it. The more likes this video gets, the more the YouTube algorithm will circulate it, and the more people can see it. And I feel that people need to see this one. The information in the history is very important as it's concerning individual human rights. And I think this is highly relevant in our current day and age, right? Now, be sure to subscribe, ding that bell notification button, and share, you guys, okay? Share. Oh, also, watch it all the way through because I have a surprise for you. I am going to introduce you to my personal magic brooms, which I have just completed over the full moon weekend, okay? All right, now, let's get into this. Okay, the history of the magic broom. First of all, I think it's safe to assume that the broom is more than likely one of mankind's earliest inventions. It's certainly an obvious one, right? Very practical as far as household chores is concerned. But it was also used ceremonially as a magic tool, okay? And rituals across the whole ancient world, from ancient Persia to Egypt to Africa to South America with the Mayans and the Aztecs to the Native American Indians, and it even shows up in the Bible, believe it or not. Now, it was used ceremonially to get rid of evil spirits, right? So sweeping away of evil spirits, evil spaces, but also to sweep away the evil spirits from persons as well. And it was used ceremonially by the tribal cultures in the administering of certain psychoactive plant medicines, okay? By fanning that smoke, to the participants, right? Now, the modern day magic broom mythology that we associate with Halloween here in the Western world has its roots in Old Europe when it was called the besom, and that's spelled B-E-S-O-M. And the name was changed to broom simply after the broom corn, the shrub that the bristles are made of. And the broom was primarily associated with women. It was known as a woman's tool, okay? Now, let's put into context the social systems of the era that we're referencing here, and it's the 15th century, okay? And the superpower then was the papacy, the Catholic Church. Right? They were the social engineers of the mass populace in that time. They were the media, they were the politics, They spun the narratives, they set the customs, and anybody who did not observe their ceremonies or live within the constructs of those customs were looked upon as heretics, pariahs, right? And women in that social construct were relegated to lives of servitude, servitude to the husband. So a whole woman's identity was the husband. That's how society was engineered then, okay? They lived solely to serve the husband, okay? Day in, day out. They would sweep, clean after him, cook for him, do it all over again, every day. That was their existence. They had no voice of their own. They had no culture of their own. They weren't encouraged to have any interests of their own. They were simply indoctrinated to serve and live for the man. Okay? Now, you can just imagine the monotony and the bleakness of such a life, right? Day in, day out, the sturm and the drang and the toil, right? And that's bound eventually to foster contempt or resentment, right? It's like a pressure cooker that's going to explode at some point and incite rebellion, right? I know if I was one of those women, I certainly would be rebelling. I'm sure you would too, right? And that's exactly what happened. Some of these women, covertly, in their own way, began rebelling against that suppression, against that culture, okay? They sort of formed their own subculture, covertly, without the husband's knowledge, or certainly not the community. The mass populace they were devoted to the Catholic Church. And that's why they all had to do this in secret. And some of these women became known as wise women, okay? And they became wise in the botanical arts and local rural folklore and mysticism, And other women started to follow suit, right? Other women started to follow suit. Now, these women were becoming very well studied in mystic arts, hence why they were called wise women. And they were obviously attaining their knowledge from some sort of source, literature, and it's more than likely there was probably a connected subculture syndicate undercover at the time, that people who weren't falling for the mass propaganda machine of the Catholic Church, and they certainly had to do it covertly because the mass populace were devoted to the Catholic Church. And when you think about it, it's not really that different nowadays, is it? No, it's the same kind of thing. Nothing new under the sun, really. Mass media, spinning narratives, dividing people. And that's exactly what happened then, too. And just like now, anybody who wasn't willing to partake in the mass conversation, the engineered, conversations and narratives, were looked upon as dangerous, Now, the papacy had their own sort of secret service, their own FBI or CIA, and they had implants throughout all the communities, Usually members of those communities, locals that people knew, who were undercover spies for the church, keeping track of what everyone was doing, okay? And these women had been witnessed gathering late at night in the fields, okay? And here's where we get the origin of the witch's Sabbath, you know, of naked witches, you know, flying under the moon on brooms, in this bacchanal sort of feast. This is the origin of that. And here's what was really going on. What was really going on is that these women were experimenting with mind-altering substances. So, you know what I'm inclined to believe is that perhaps they were influenced by shamanic practices. Okay? They were known as wise women, so they obviously liberated themselves into developing their own interests, into educating themselves, and a lot of that happened to be the mystical arts. So they probably read texts about the Druids or the Celts, the Aborigines of Africa, you know, all of which, you know, did such rituals, mind-altering plant medicines to commune and expand their consciousness, right? I don't think it's probably not that much different than what we do nowadays, you know. You pop an ecstasy pill, you drop a tab of acid, and you go to the rave, or you go to Burning Man, or Coachella, or, you know, EDC, or just whatever music festival. You know, it's not that different. It's just that time then, if women were doing anything other than living in servitude to their husband, they were considered evil. And here's where we get the folklore and the mythology of the flying broom. And what it actually pertains to is what was called flying ointment, okay? And this was a brew, which is where we get the witch's brew from, which was a concoction of various venomous, deadly moonflowers that corresponded with the fae, the fairy, okay? And the brew consisted of belladonna, the infamous belladonna, which was also known as deadly nightshade, henbane, wolfsbane, the mandragora, which is the mandrake root. And for those of you who are familiar with one of my personal favorite films ever, Pan's Labyrinth, the mandrake root makes an appearance in that film. There's a role in that movie. And the other flower, which really hit home for me, was Datura stramonium, and her sister, the angel trumpet, which is the Brugmansia tree. Okay. Now, I have a story about those flowers, my own personal story that just happened recently, and that actually was the impetus for me to do this video, okay? And I was going to share it in this video, but it's a little too long, and it's expounding on my experience, and this is about them, okay? So I'm going to do that in a separate video, because I already recorded the footage, and I just realized this is going to be too long. This video would have been probably an hour long if I'd included it. Now, it gets a little more wild here, as far as the broom's concerned. What these women had to do, because they couldn't ingest it orally, because this was deadly. This would kill you, these flowers. That's how deadly they are. I'm going to have to take this off, you guys. Sorry, it's getting a little hot in here. Anyhow, what they had to do was they had to ingest it elsewhere, okay? And what they did is they made the brew into a salve, you know, adding, I think, beeswax, and they would get their brooms, okay? And they would anoint the broom, right? And they would ride the broom, okay? And thereby ingesting the hallucinogen, you know, below, you know, they're, you know, they're unmentionables. Sorry. Now, these onlookers or spies, you know, that had witnessed this gathering, were claiming they saw them flying on brooms, and what was really going on is there was a custom in the rural area. They had a custom of getting their brooms and their pitchfork and hopping over the hedges, and it was just to celebrate, you know, the growth of crops. It's just a tradition, a rural tradition, and probably they were on an acid trip. They were tripping, and they were just, you know, frolicking. They were in an altered state of consciousness. They were just exploring that side of consciousness. And, you know, when you think about it, these poor things, they probably hadn't had fun since they were probably little girls, right? They probably just needed to let their hair down, you know? They probably just needed a girls' night out, you know what I mean? Let's be honest here. You know, they just need to get their groove on, you know, get a little intoxicated and have fun like we do nowadays, you know? You know, just go out to the club, get your party on. We all need to have a little fun once in a while, right? Now, this intel was, of course, immediately reported to the clergy, and the Catholic Church proceeded to implement a sort of psyops, sort of social engineering, sort of mind control tactics via their promoting of propaganda and merch. And signs were posted, and there were sort of pamphlets passed around, and with artwork, these drawings of these women, you know, diseased with sort of hairy warts and missing teeth and spindly fingers. And here is where the origin of the witch, this is where it began. These are some of the first images of the iconic Wicked Witch as we know it, the hag, all right? And they also were promoting these women were contagious, that these women were riddled with evil spirits and diseases, and that they were contagious. And this stirred the public into a frenzy, into a panic. And of course, this was very effective and tactical on the Catholic Church's part at ensuring that these women were separated from the public, that they were shunned, that no one would go near them, and that they had no chance of explaining themselves or telling their side of the story. And then the Catholic Church went even further and got even more aggressive and published a book, okay? A book was published soon after, and this book was titled Malleus Maleficarum, which is translated into The Hammer of the Witch, and it was written by two German men who happened to be clergymen of the Catholic Church, the German division. And you have to understand this media machine that they had. It was all across Europe, all countries, okay? And it was 1486 is when this book was published, and it went viral. It went viral. And it was the highest selling book, selling more copies than any other book, other than the Bible. And that title, it kept that position in sales for over 100 years, okay? And the names of the authors were Heinrich Krummer and Jakob Spanger, okay? And the book was a compendium of demonology, and it included instructions on how to hunt and spot witches and how to torture them into confession, all right? And this book is what is responsible for inciting the mass public carnage and butchery. And this is where the infamous historical witch hunts that we all know about, this is how it began. So the civilian population proceeded to follow those instructions, and this was kind of the Catholic Church's way of kind of giving the public the green light, right? To go ahead and do it. This was the beginning. This is where the blood and carnage began, and the public, of course, ate it up, and there was a stampede of just butchery and bloodlust. They hunted down women all over Europe, and over 100,000 women were butchered and tortured, okay? Many of whom were probably not even had anything to do with this, because it got to the point where if a woman was just single, happened to have not ever gotten married, or if she was widowed, they accused them of being witches, and they would publicly torture these people. And you know, it makes you wonder, like, you know, these civilians, you know, it makes you wonder about humans. You know, did they really have to do that? Or are they Just, they liked doing it. They enjoyed it, you know. Right. Now, women were taken to the public forum and they were tortured publicly, and they were tortured into confessing all sorts of things, like shape-shifting. They spun the story that these women were shape-shifting into birds and cats and rabbits, which even caused the civilian population to even go around killing cats and rabbits and birds, thinking that they were witches. And it's amazing, isn't it? That the mass population, and it's no different nowadays either, you know, when they get together, they mob together and have they target an individual or group. They will utilize any excuse or any reason for bloodlust, for butchery. That's pretty much what happens with humans throughout history in these kind of situations. Now, one of the main confessions that these women under torture were tortured into confessing was riding a broom, riding the broom, okay? But interestingly so, the very first witch documented to have confessed to riding the broom was actually not a woman. No, it was not. It was a man, okay? It was a man. And his name was Guillaume Edelin. And he was a priest in Saint-Germain, France. And he came out of the broom closet publicly in defense of the massacre that was taking place on these women. And he was publicly tortured for it. But interesting thing, unlike the women, they didn't execute him. They kept him alive, but they imprisoned him, in which he was tortured for the remainder of his life. Okay, and I think I know why they did that. First of all, he's a priest, and I think they were utilizing him as a public example. They were warning any other man who may decide to come up and in defense of these women, they were using this guy as an example of what would happen to them. And you know, energetically, I was getting a download about this man, Guillaume Edelin. He's the only man to confess to being a witch riding on a broom. I got the energy he was gay. And that makes a lot of sense. Now, this is not documented. This is just something that energy I was receiving. But it does make sense, doesn't it? It would be the gay man who would actually stand up for the women. Because you have to understand, the heterosexual male community, they were all in cultural collusion in the domestication of women. So they weren't going to say anything, right? And you know, there's a whole section of this video that I had to abandon, and it was in the research of the torture chambers of the Catholic Church, of the witch hunts, and I was researching it, and some of these devices, these elaborate torture devices that they had invented for this purpose, it's just, I couldn't even go to sleep. I couldn't continue. I had to abandon that. And it's horrible. It's devastating. It's what happened to these women. There isn't even enough words. It is like the most depraved of any horror film that you've probably ever seen. Just looking at just the devices that they created. I don't even want to get into it, but I don't recommend researching it. I really don't. Especially if you're an empath like me. Do not do it. Just take my word for it, okay? And, you know, this is a very somber story, a very somber history lesson, isn't it? And I was feeling very, pisses me off. It just really pisses me off. But we need to find some sort of redemption energetically for these people, what they went through. I couldn't let it go. I was disturbed, you guys. I couldn't stop thinking about it. I was laying in bed, I was up, I just couldn't stop thinking about it. I could feel these souls, I could feel their souls, these women. An energy came to me, and I like to think there was them, or some of them, that there's a redemption here, that they were not the victim, that they actually were victorious. And I sat there and I sat up. And and it was downloaded to me, and it made sense. You see, these women, these were some of the first women in history to had gathered together of their own volition, outside of the grip of the husband and the culture at the time, and who had the nerve, who were brave enough and had the audacity to do their own thing, to develop their own interests, to search for their own truth, for their own meaning in life. And they did it. And they died for it. But it's like this, you can take my body, you can kill me, but I will ever get on my hands and knees for you or anybody, ever. And that was the energy I got. And I think we can learn the energy from them, right? That takes a lot of integrity and bravery and character and soul, right? And that's what these women, I believe, have. Okay. So now, this Halloween, when you see that trope, that silhouette of that witch in the broom flying over the moon, now you know the origin of it, and the depth and the epic saga behind that little kind of kooky image, right? There's so much more there. And maybe take a moment this Halloween, take a moment, just your heart, just give them a blessing. These women, what they went through, okay? Because they were some of the women that kind of energetically, they opened a portal. Let's all, let's all bow to them, right? And funnel the energy of honor and victory, and respect to these women. Okay. So, remember I told you guys, I'm going to introduce you guys to my Magic Brooms. Well, here we go. Okay, so I said I would introduce you all to my Magic Besoms, my Magic Brooms. Now, the first one is done in honor of the Divine Mother aspect, and I made her over the weekend, just before the full moon on Monday, the full moon in Pisces, because I wanted to have her done by then so that I could charge her in the moon. Her name is Percival, okay, and her broomstick is bamboo, okay, right, there she is. See? Let me get out of the way, and here she is in all her glory, okay? I have the fertility egg there. Okay. And that is Percival. And I love her. She has such an energy. She really does. I charged her in the moon this past Monday, full moon in Pisces. And my second one is the divine masculine aspect, okay? Now, I completed him on the night of the full moon, and he's been charged in the sun. His name is Vulcanus, after the Roman god of fire, son of Zeus. Very, very, very handsome, very sexually powerful, masculine, divine masculine energy. So there's his, and I love how thick and curved he is. And here he is. There's Vulcanus, you guys. He's really big and long. I want to show you some of the craftsmanship I put into it. let me get out of the way, okay? Give him the spotlight. Volcanus. Look at him. Look here. Now, story about Volcanus. Let me give you the tea on Volcanus, okay? Like I said, I completed him on the night of the full moon, okay? Now, I kid you not, guys, story about Volcanus. Completed him on the full moon night, and that night, I kid you not, you guys, this is no joke, Volcanus came into my dream, and I went lucid, and I kid you not, we were flying around my neighborhood, around Hollywood. I live in Hollywood, California, world famous Hollywood. And I went lucid, and this went on for hours. We were flying all over Hollywood. It was amazing. I didn't want it to end. But then there came a point where we were flying level, like almost street level, and we went to this alleyway, okay? And there was something about this alleyway, like the end of the alleyway was just really dark, and it's like you could hear this hollow sound, and I sensed something really bad. Like I got this vibe that it was a portal, like a black hole portal, and I was like, oh no, Volcanus, we can't go forward. And you know what Volcanus did? No joke. Oh my God, you guys! He went backwards. He went shh, and we were like shh, out of the alley, and we went straight up, backwards, way up in the sky. God, it was so freaky, but it was awesome. And then we went all the way back down. Oh my God, I loved it. Like, isn't that awesome? Now, Percival has not entered my dreams yet, so I haven't flown her yet, like in the astral realm or in the dream realm, however you want to interpret that. Volcanus. All right, you guys. Okay. So there's Volcanus, my man, my beautiful, handsome besom. And there they are. Here they are. Volcanus and Percival. Alright, you guys. Mwah. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And if you guys have any information, like let's say you know more about what happened with the witches, the witch hunt, maybe there's some information that I didn't know, please share the info with me in the comments, because I'd really love to know. And have a happy Halloween, okay?